So when I was pregnant with my first child, like at that point I'd been working for a long time, and I sort of knew how to navigate the world and eliminate the things that caused me to have those types of reactions. But when I was pregnant with my first child, my mother recommended a detergent that I use that is special for people who, have babies. It's like a baby detergent. And I had an allergic reaction to it, and it reminded me, I went back to being a kid in the hospital with breathing machines, and on all this medication. And I called my mom, and I'm hugely pregnant and sweaty and hormonal. And I was like, Mom, I'm having an allergic reaction to this detergent. How can you tell me to use it? What are you doing? And she was like, I used it on you when you were a baby. You were fine. She's like, everybody uses it. You're hormonal. She's like, you asked me for my advice and I gave it to you. Call me back when you're done yelling. And I was like, Mom, what's in this? And she's like, I don't know. Read the label. So that her saying that and me wanting to know what was it in this detergent that caused this type of reaction, and me going and reading a label and feeling like I needed to be a chemist or a toxicologist to understand what was even inside of it, and could these ingredients possibly affect my health, which I knew it did. Obviously, I had this reaction, and it really brought me to, in a lot of research that I did, to a website that really kind of broke down the link that certain chemicals have in chemical exposure to chronic illnesses like asthma, allergies, but also learning disabilities. They're hormone disruptors, a lot of them, and also cancer. So I was pretty horrified just knowing that there was very little government oversight when it comes to the use of these chemicals that are in everyday products. And I was also pretty terrified that my little new baby could possibly have a reaction where she would stop breathing, like I did as a kid. And I was like, I wouldn't be able to live with myself if that happened, and she can't speak, So I lobbied on Capitol Hill. I advocated for chemical reform to at least get chemicals to the level of where they are in Europe, where they have to test chemicals for safety prior to bringing them into the marketplace, and kind of got nowhere. Everyone just wanted to know, was I a liberal or a conservative? Who was behind this bill? And it was more like, well, do our voters know about this or care about it? Versus what's just the right thing to do for human beings, There were, at the time, only 11 chemicals that were banned in the U.S., even asbestos, which we all know, if you find asbestos, guys with hazmats are showing up at your house and you have to leave the premises immediately. It was still legal. And so I was like, somebody's got to do something about this. And I felt like going the nonprofit or charity route, while advocacy is important, I felt like there was something about the model. And my husband, who's also an entrepreneur, who's also here in this room, he was like, let's think about a more sustainable way to think about giving back or charity or having these values, and have a for-profit model applied against it. And I was like, yeah, and so then I just kept building the and and the and and the and. And the and, it should be clean ingredients that you can trust, transparent. It should stand for the ethics and values that we all hold, and apply to our lives. Why does it have to sort of be disconnected from the way a business is run? And I felt like it should also give back. Not everyone has the opportunity to provide basic essentials for their families. We should have that component just built into the business model. And we should think about, obviously, the impact on the planet. If it's good for human beings, it'll be better for the planet for sure. And so these were the values that I wanted to build this brand on. And for me, it wasn't just one product. It wasn't just a detergent, right? And when I did lots of tests and research, I learned that it's beauty products, it's personal care products, bath and body products. It's your home detergents. It really is everything that's in, on, and around you. And Black and brown people are actually affected more by exposure to these toxic chemicals when it comes to their health and adverse effects. So I was just like, there just has to be a better solution and a better way. And I didn't blame big business. I mean, these companies that have been around for a long time were built on a totally different model. It was, how can we put as many of these chemicals in as many consumer products as humanly possible for as cheap as possible? And it was just about scale and marketing. And I was like, how about putting human health and wellness first? Thinking about the effect on the planet. And then why don't you do good and give back while you're at it? And so, it did take me 3.5 years to raise money. A lot of people, especially in Hollywood, were telling me I should be the face of perfume, because that was like the hot thing at the moment. Everyone was doing perfumes. And I was just like, perfume is pretty toxic. It's kind of against my ethos. And I was
Jessica, tell us a little bit about the funding process and scaling of this business. I think this audience would love to hear the experience that you had.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, like, in Hollywood, for every yes that if anybody's seen anything that I've done, for every yes that I got 1,000 no's. And so there's nothing like being able to take rejection, it's slapped in my face every single day. I'm not this enough, I'm not that enough. So when I got rejected for the first 3.5 years on starting this business, I had kind of built up a bit of an armor. And it didn't deter me from my goal or my mission. It, in fact, just sort of fueled me, not only to prove that this is something that just needed to be done, but also it helped me refine my business model. I mean, I didn't know how to put together a deck or a business plan. I didn't go to college for this. I started with a vision board. It was a lot of ideas. It was really long. And I learned over that 3.5 years how to hone it into like a 10-page deck that was succinct. And I learned how to read a room. And when you walk in a room with a bunch of white guys who are, looking at you as an opportunity for them to make money, you then on the other end have to know what questions to ask. And so I had to learn pretty quickly, is this, what fund is this in? When is it going to mature? Is it a 3-year or a 5-year fund? And if you guys, get money from anyone, make sure it's the 5-year fund, not the 3. Because they will try, unfortunately, when they need to get their payouts, sometimes they can force you to do things that aren't great for your business in order for them to get their exit, because the fund is done and they're raising more money for the next thing. I kind of learned that the hard way. But again, I think I learned it so that I could pass on this knowledge to you, so you guys don't have to make some of those mistakes. But it was really interesting. A lot of let me go home and ask my wife. And I remember I went to a few places where they didn't have a women's restroom. I was 7.5 months pregnant, so I had to pee a lot. And some firms just, it was like the men's restroom and do we have a women's restroom kind of thing. And it was like,
Jessica, the folks that you ultimately ended up taking money from, how did you make those decisions, and what lessons might you share with the group as you walked through the various stages of funding this business?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest, for me at the time, the biggest barrier is like, I'd never done this before. And it's really, I guess, sort of the leap of faith that investors would have to make on me on such a complex business, because they only know Unilever and Procter and Clorox and Kimberly and Estee Lauder and Coty. Like, these are massive companies that have been around for hundreds of, 100+ years. And they were like, you want to build that today from scratch? Okay, how are you going to do that? So I had to sort of like look at what was trending in the marketplace at that time, what VCs were excited about investing in, and I kind of molded my idea to fit the zeitgeist of what was going on in the tech world and the VC world. I knew I wanted to launch a brand on the digital platform. I knew I didn't want to launch it initially with a retailer because then they would really kind of hold the reins when it comes to the narrative of your business. And so I knew we could have more authenticity by having a direct relationship with the consumer. So at the time, I actually partnered up with an entrepreneur, a serial entrepreneur in the tech space that is known for being the guy that created the subscription business model, Brian Lee. And so I basically fit my business idea into this subscription business model, and it actually made sense. Nobody wants to run out of diapers and wipes at 3 in the morning. And so if we can take that headache away for parents, great. When you go to the grocery store after you've had kids, there's nothing more frustrating than your cart being completely full with things that are non-perishable, and then you're like, no room for the fruits, veggies, no room for the milk or anything else. Like, what? And I was like, wouldn't it be great if all of these things can just be delivered to your door? And then when you do take that trip to the grocery, it's all for your fresh produce. And so I really built this subscription model to bring ease to people's lives, and they got a better price, and they got to sort of customize their experience. I also, so that was kind of the biggest thing.
Honest was really one of the first digitally native brands at any scale.
Yeah, I mean, they really looked at these categories as a commodity, and they were like, nobody's going to really buy these things online direct from a business. And I had a lot of conviction. I guess it's sort of like if anybody recommended a McKinsey study to say, well, let us collect the data to see if this idea is a good one, you wouldn't find any because it never had been done. I just knew intuitively my sort of pain points and my friends' pain points, and I felt like we could solve them. And so I partnered with a guy that I knew VCs could trust and wanted to invest in, and then plugged into really the trending kind of business model around predictability and subscriptions, which was the hot thing at the time in tech.
And talk a little bit about the skills that you build over time and maybe the challenges. So if I'm an entrepreneur, founder sitting in the room, what were the skills that you needed to build, and where were the challenges, and where are some of the potential pitfalls?
Yeah, I mean, there's always, I think as far as, which ones do you want me to go down the road of? I guess I've made every mistake. Now, I think one of the biggest ones is you can't build your business alone. You have to partner with people. You have to get a team aligned and energized to execute on your vision, and at no matter what level they're at. So whether they're equal, you bring them in as equal partners, whether it is the money, and if the money wants to have a board seat or an opinion, all the way through to people that you employ to execute on the day-to-day, those are big decisions. And I think if they are aligned with you on the mission of the company, then you're golden. If all they want to do is, all they care about is making money, I think karmically, if that's not your only goal, you're going to have to sort of deal with what that looks like and how that plays out, no matter what. And that was, for me, a tough lesson. Because while I know you could make a ton of money if you execute on this vision properly, but you have to do it with integrity. And that was something I guess I just didn't realize, that everyone needs to have integrity.
And maybe if we can double click on that, I mean, one of your superpowers is you always keep the customer, you keep her in the boardroom, and every time you're discussing anything related to Honest. Can you talk about that? That's the one thing that I've been so impressed by.
Oh, thanks.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
We're learning here as we go.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I feel like the mission of my company is really around like inspiring everyone to love living consciously. What does that mean? What does that look like? How does that play out? It's putting the consumer first, putting yourself in their shoes, having that empathy of what they might be going through in that moment. And as we are developing product, whether it's a skincare product or it's a baby product, thinking about where are they in their life at that moment when they are using that product, and how is this product going to make their life better. And so I've always put that lens on everything from developing product from scratch to how we market, how we communicate, and even our retail partners, how they communicate and how we show up in those environments. So that is something that I really push. It's interesting because, as over time, as you scale, you bring in people who are experts, right, who have a lot of experience in a lot of these industries that have been around for 100+ years. And I didn't realize how different my approach is, and how much kind of like reworking or retraining their process is, and how much unwinding needs to be done in order for them to fit inside of what Honest is about, which is, again, putting the human being first. So yeah, that's been, but I did feel really insecure about it for a long time. And I would say it took me about 3.5 years until I really started to feel comfortable even saying I'm the one that founded the company, and I'm the one that actually brought in the other 3 guys to co-found with me. And, I think a lot of people thought that I was the celebrity face and that they created the business. It was the opposite. So
I love that. And Jessica, as you realize the power of Honest and what it could become in the world, how did that make you feel, that this was kind of birthed out of a passion, just as you focus on your first child? Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah. It's really interesting because, I guess you sort of, or anyone would always sort of reflect on the impact, right, that your idea had, just depending on, how far along you are in reaching that goal. And I would say, my biggest mission from day one was we're gonna have healthier people. People are going to be less sick. The planet will be less sick, and people will be treated with dignity who just were never felt like they were seen or heard before. And these are grand. That's kind of a big idea, and people think that it's maybe too big. But for me, when I look up and I see, when I was first walking into rooms, and I was getting laughed out of rooms in Hollywood, and laughed sort of out of rooms, and people just wanted to take a photo with me because they saw me in a thing. And then now they're these are table stakes values that need to be applied to the entire industry. And all these 100-year-old companies are now having to look at how they can reshape themselves to look and feel and operate more like Honest. And so something that was considered niche is now table stakes. So, yeah, and diversity, equity, and inclusion, those are key pillars. You can operate a good business and do good and be fair. You can do right by the people you serve, but you can do right by your employees. It all can be done. You just have to be that proof point. You have to be bold enough or courageous enough to show them that it can be done.
Jessica, can you talk a little bit about the company that you've built? I joined the board a couple of years ago, but if I look at the diversity of our board and the executive team, you and our CEO, Nick Vlaus, have done just a fantastic job. We've got a board that is 70% women and people of color, over 50% women, just an incredibly diverse board. As you speak to the founders sitting in the room, how would you have them think about building a different kind of company, the kind of company that you couldn't find as you went out to fundraise? And talk a little bit about your intentionality in the way you built Honest.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because when I first started, a lot of my instincts or a lot of the things that I felt like were the most important, they kept saying like, right, but you really can't do all of that, or that's just not how it works. I've done this before. And I think it took me a really long time to really trust my instincts and trust my gut and just sort of force them in a nice way. And sometimes just sort of like, you either want to be here or you don't. In some circumstances, in other circumstances, make them feel like it's their idea. However they get there, it doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, you just need to put in processes around your hiring, around your promoting, where diversity, equity, and inclusion is just sort of embedded in that. If it's not embedded in your process, it won't happen. And then the more you can publicly go out in front of it, then even people who kind of want to take it away in the background, they can't. It puts it in your favor because you're like, we've already talked about this. This is something that matters. And then the rest of the team sort of signs up and they get on board, but they're uncomfortable because they've never done it before. They've never sat in a room where there's so much diversity. A lot of them aren't friends with people that don't look like them. A lot of their wives are at home and they're not in the workplace as an equal, trying to get through challenges. And so they just don't know what they don't know, and you can't fault them for that. But also, you don't need to do anything that feels wrong for you. And so I think that's just the processes, like really getting tight on that. So for every, white guy, I want to see 2 to 3 different kinds of people. And it's just like, I'm not going to hire this role until that happens.
Love that. Love it. So Jessica, you've been just an inspiration to entrepreneurs, moms, artists. Can you talk a little bit about how you leverage your platform for good in the world?
It's interesting because, I grew up, in a super typical, Mexican-American family where, my grandma... So I grew up with 3 generations in the home, and my grandma wouldn't let me go to friends' houses. She was like, why do you need friends? You got me. And I was like, you're right. And she's like, and you have your cousins. So, and I'm like, right, I know, Grandma, but, I want to, have sleepovers. She's like, why? And I, for a long time, but at the same time, my grandfather, who was the only one who went to college, and he worked at a corporate job. He would have been the CFO at the time. They called him a bookkeeper of a big kind of paper mill corporation. And he brought in, I think, at least 10 or 11 family members who were definitely not qualified in any way, shape, or form to work in this environment, to bring them in and give them a shot and to try and elevate the family. He had 6 houses, and he put family in all of them. He was very frugal. Like our Betty Crocker tubs of butter became all of our Tupperware. Because like, why would you buy Tupperware when you can just reuse that? It's good. My grandma would be like, it's good. What was embarrassing is when she would want us to like take our lunch, in the Betty Crocker. I'm like, no, Grandma, please. But it's interesting, those values are really embedded in what I wanted, to build at Honest in the culture. And kind of, I'm hoping what I represent as a person is to always help out others, always treat others how you would like to be treated. I didn't get many handouts. I didn't get anyone helping me on my journey. If anything, I got a lot of naysayers, pretty much just telling me every reason why I shouldn't be successful in entertainment or in business. And I'm just hoping to push open the door, knock over the wall, make it wide so many more can run through.
So big question, take us on the journey of taking the Honest Company public and what that felt like. There's some intentionality around the actual day that we rang the bell, and I think this group would, and that's one of the reasons that I love being on this journey with this company. But take us through the intentionality and what it feels like to be a female Latina founder doing something that almost nobody else has ever done. But I know we both hope many more will follow.
Yeah, it's interesting because, when you are a public company, you are inviting even more criticism. You get a lot of people who it's their job to criticize you, to tear you down, to break you down, to rip you apart because it makes them look smarter or something. I don't know. But I think that fear is something that I really had to overcome in the process, to be honest, because I looked at the other side of it, and the fact that when we took the company public, I was the youngest Latina that ever took a company public that was in leadership. But I'm no spring chicken, but I just felt like, what, in this day and age? Like, why? It just felt wild. And even just the stats around, like, between 2013 to 2020, I think it is, of the 2,000 companies that were that went public, only 18 of them had female leadership. And we are 50% of the population. Like, what is going on? And I think what's going on is that they make it feel really scary to be in this seat. But I think if we can make space for more of us, and just by me being up there and taking the company public, it then allows for more women, more people of color, more people who didn't have all of the opportunities to feel like maybe they deserve to be up there. And so that was really why I did it, and that is something that we share a passion around.
Absolutely.
Is for us not to be the 2% anymore.
And what day did we take the company public?
Jen. Oh, yeah. Cinco de Mayo.
Okay, come on, Jess. Come on, Jessica.
That was a setup. That
was not a trick question, but it was very intentional.
I turned 40 during a 4 a.m. wake-up call on a road show pitching analysts, and it was very surreal. very surreal. And my kids were there, and my husband. It was really bizarre. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, Jessica, I think we're getting to the end of this one, and I want to give you one last opportunity to share with this fantastic group a takeaway message to help them think about the future if they're either venture folks that are funding companies or folks that are hoping to do what you've done. What last message would you leave this audience with?
I mean, if you are on the banker side, it's just a good investment to invest in women, to invest in people of color. You almost can't screw it up. And so push yourself a little bit outside of the comfort zone and try to do more of it and advocate for it. I think if you are in a position of power in any way, shape, or form, and you have an opportunity to bring up someone else, and they're like, oh, you just want to bring in this person because, you know, they're a woman, right? Or they're Latina or they're Latino, just like you. And instead of being shy or embarrassed, you should say, hell yeah, because no one else is going to next.
I love that.
You know, continue to push and make space to have more people look like you or look like what you don't normally see. It will only be for a better outcome for the business. It will be a better investment. It's proven in data that it just is, because you'll have better thoughts, better mind, better experiences tackling challenges, and you will have a better outcome. So it's a good investment. Do more of it. Make space for more people. And, you know, be vulnerable to also ask questions. If you're sitting across from somebody who has a different experience, be open with them. Say, I've never had this experience, and I don't know where to begin with you. And you can, I'm sure you will find a lot of commonality in just being a human being that wants to do the right thing. And you can start there. And also read James's book. It's great. It's actually wonderful, and I think it should be curriculum, and I think it should be mandatory for every business to have this book. Seriously, it's amazing. So
I'd love to have us give my good friend, family member, Jessica Alba, a rousing applause. I thought she was fantastic.